I record my lectures. So what I do is I record the discussion, I record what we have. And so if you want to refresh your memory of what we covered, you could always watch the video. I have a YouTube channel. I'm a pretty hip guy. I got 20 subscribers. Yeah, I know that's a lot. I know. Yeah, hey, take it down a notch, all right? Don't get too overwhelmed about that, all right? Mostly they're family, all right? They're mostly family. But it's okay. I'm good with that. But what I do, I upload them on YouTube so you can watch them. Just make sure you watch the right video because I uploaded my previous semester videos there. So you could watch like previous semesters if you want to get like well informed about other things. So I'll do that with this one. Is that okay with you? All right. And don't worry, it's no video, so it doesn't, if you participate in the discussion, nobody can tell who it is. So unless you identify yourself, like, hey, I'm this person. And then I'm like, well, you're being recorded. So just be cautious about that. Okay, so we're going to go over the quiz. So according to the lecture, which of the following statements describe the reason we need to learn statistics? So I indicated to you, you may select more than one option. So either summarize, simplify data and information, make reasonable inferences, conclusions based on probability, understand systematic quantitative research and its power and limitations, produce systematic research. So the answer is all of them. So I noticed some of you selected some selected one. Essentially, the answer for this one is all of them. Any questions on this one? The term empiricism is best referred to which of the following statements? So that's good. Most of you are getting this. Now, what happens to it, I allow you to take it multiple times. So you could always take it multiple times, and sometimes what you do is, like if you get an answer incorrect, you could take it again and figure it out which one's the right answer. So most of you got this right. Good. Knowledge is acquired through senses. So in the previous lectures, we talked about the term empiricism, empirical evidence. What does it mean? It means something that you can experience, something you can see, something that you can hear, you can feel, you can smell. Essentially, things that you can use. You use your senses to either measure, identify, evaluate, review. Anything you experience essentially comes from what we call the philosophical foundation of empiricism. There's another body of, or another philosophical perspective that says that some people are born with knowledge. It's not that, this is not the case. Empiricism is like you gain knowledge through your experience, the things that you see, you hear, you feel. So the answer was to this one was knowledge is acquired through our senses. It's not innate, so nobody chose that. Knowledge is acquired through traditions. No, it's basically, it goes against that. It's something that you experience, something or other people experience, but not tradition is knowledge that was just passed down, but may not be based on experience. Okay, moving on. Which two scales of measurement indicate the amount which participants differ from each other? Okay, so the answers are interval and ratio. They're not ordinal and nominal. So just to kind of illustrate to you, let's see here, give me a moment. So we have data can be divided into 4 categories: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So here, examples could include like colors, red, they're just essentially categories. You can't order them. It could be red, like colors. It could be ethnicity. It could be gender. They're just categories. So you can't order them. You don't know the difference between these two. You can't put them in the same, like, let's say, spectrum. You can't say, well, this is different than that one. I mean, you can, as categories, you can make that, you can state that, but you can't say the distance between red and blue is et cetera, et cetera. You can't make any statements like that. You can't determine how quantitatively different are these two. Ordinal is like you can rank people, or you can rank, let's say in a race or swimming race. You know, somebody got first place. Or like I keep using the example of the Olympics. Okay, somebody got gold, silver, bronze. You can order them. Gold is better. Silver is second best. Third is third best. But you don't know how far from each other they are. You can order them. You can rank them. But you don't know if the gold medal winner was, let's say, 5 minutes faster than the previous winner, or the silver medal winner. You can just order them. Interval and ratio, on the other hand, you can make those determinations. You could say, like, the first swimmer took them 5 minutes. The second one took them 2 minutes. I'm sorry, 7. The third one, it took them 9 minutes. So you know the difference between these two is 2. The difference between these two is 2 as well. So interval, you know exactly the distance between each other. The same thing with ratio. So if you had some similar findings or similar results, another swimmer swam about, let's say it took him 2 minutes, 4 minutes for the second one, 6 minutes. So you know the difference between these is 2 as well. Now, the difference between these two, interval and ratio, they're actually very similar with each other. The only difference is that ratio has a starting point of 0 compared to interval, which does not. So going back to the question, which two scales of measurement indicate the amount by which participants differ from each other? So the answers were interval and ratio. Any questions on these? Okay. If you do have any questions, let me know. Which scale of measurement has an absolute 0? All right, 100%. That's good. You all got it right. If you measure the weight of participants in pound, which scale measurement are you using? So majority of you selected ratio. A couple of you selected interval. So I'm going to reveal who selected interval. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. Unless you confess. Who wants to confess? No. Just kidding. I'm kidding. I don't like to do that. I don't do stuff like that, by the way. I like to joke around that I do stuff like that, but I don't do that. So a weight scale starts off with 0. So that's one key way to determine if it's a ratio or an interval. Like, what's the starting point? Does it start at 0? Or does it have a different starting point? So that's one way to do it. So the answer is ratio. Let's see, next one. If you rank employees from most cooperative to least cooperative, which scale of measurement are you using? So that's good. Majority of you selected ordinal. So if you're going to rank them, like the most cooperative is, let's say, John. Second most cooperative, Jacob. Third one, I don't know, Linda. I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you just rank them, they're ordinal. But you don't know the distance between each other. You don't know how most cooperative they are. It could be a huge gap between, let's say, first place and second place. You don't know that. You just put them, you just rank them. So the answer is ordinal. I noticed one of you indicated nominal. Nominal, remember, is just to categorize. You can't order them. Nominal, you can just categorize. You don't know any other information other than that. Interval, it cannot be interval because you don't know the distance from each other. You're just ranking them. And nobody selected ratio, which is good. And then the other one, the last one, I just wanted to see if you can come up with some examples of each category. And I think majority of you selected or used categories or used terms that we talked about the last class, so which is good. All right, that covers the quiz. Was the quiz pretty straightforward, complicated, fair, unfair? What do you think? Fair? All right, so next one will be unfair. Okay? Just a joke, all right. I'm following my 10-second rule. All right, good. Let's see what else I have in store for you. All right, so today we're going to talk about, we already went through the quiz. We'll talk about the research process, what is research, how is new knowledge created. We'll talk about brief introduction and overview of research methods, empirical research, quantitative and qualitative research, data collection methods, surveys and types of survey questions, experimental and non-experimental research. So we'll be covering these topics today. Let's see. Just to let you know that there's a big debate about Likert scales. So who's ever taken a survey before? Good. And so do these look familiar? It's like when you take a survey, do you strongly agree, strongly disagree, likely, not likely, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big debate in the social sciences, if not also physical sciences. The physical scientists, the engineers, they think that this is more like an ordinal type of scale because you order them. But in the social sciences, they indicate that these are actually intervals. And we treat them as intervals because we actually do a lot of mathematical calculations with these survey results. And so we determine averages, things like that. But if there were to be ordinals, we couldn't do averages. We couldn't add them together. So we eventually, in the social sciences, just an FYI, we have decided that these Likert scales type of scales are intervals. So we try our best to make create some kind of distance or determine some kind of gap or distance between very happy, somewhat happy, neutral. I mean, in the social science, it gets a little bit muddy, it gets a little bit complicated. What is like very happy to you compared to somewhat happy? What is strongly agree versus neither disagree nor disagree? So sometimes it can get a little bit complicated. But just to kind of just let you know that these are treated as intervals in the social sciences. Okay, so let's talk about the origins of knowledge. Like where does it come from? So it comes from curiosity, problems, essentially questions. Like how did you learn like the English language? Anyway, how did you learn?
Heard it.
You heard it. Maybe when do you remember? When's like the first memory that you remember? Anybody? You remember? Your first memory? Go ahead.
I remember like in first grade or kindergarten because I was in a bilingual class. So I remember the teacher telling us we're gonna like switch on to English.
Okay. And so you started learning English at that time. But mostly, was it another language before that?
Spanish.
So you learned it from other people. Like I'm assuming there were relatives, parents, that we're teaching other you at least what language to speak, right? Is that a fair assumption? So you learn it from other people. It could be books. It could be TV. There's so many ways to gain or acquire knowledge. Ultimately, what happens is that you may have questions, and you're curious about this. Like, why is the sky blue? Why, how do hills form? Why are there so many people in the U.S. or in China? I mean, you can have all these different questions, and ultimately you want answers. And so, knowledge initially comes in the form of a question, because you're curious about it. You want it to be an answer. Now, there's a lot of things out there in the world that you can always ask questions about. These are common things. These are current events. Current issues include like climate change. You could ask questions about that. Large-scale conflicts, income inequality, poverty. There's so many things out there to ask questions about. But these are just hot topics. And so these are just an example of a list of the research questions. So let's say if you were curious about pollution, you can narrow it down to the point where it becomes a research question, something you can learn more about, something you can research more about. From pollution to what can the U.S. do to prevent acid rain? I'm just giving you some examples here. Let's say nutrition. And then, okay, what about nutrition? You can narrow it down a little bit more. Talk about diets, vegetarianism. What nutritional benefits are there to vegetarianism? So essentially, it all comes in the form of questions, where you want to find answers to. And so that's where the scientific method comes in handy. The scientific method offers you a way to at least come up with an answer to your question. So, but you need to think like a scientist, or you at least use scientific thinking. Scientific thinking is knowledge seeking, involves applying skepticism to ideas and forming testable hypotheses. This type of thinking can lead to experiments and determine whether a claim hypothesis is true or false. So we can make lots of claims. We can say that to get an A in this class, you must be here every day, or not every day, but every time we have class, do your quizzes, do your assignments, the likelihood of you getting an A is pretty high. I'm making that claim. Is that a fair claim? Now, what if I claim, if you want to get an A in this class, you don't show up to class, don't do any of the assignments, you don't take the quiz. We can test that claim. Don't volunteer, okay? But we can test that claim to say, well, let's see if it's true. Very likely that's not the case. So you make a claim and you want to support it. You want to say, well, you want to see if that claim is true or not. So that's where the scientific method comes in handy. So scientific method is a process used to validate observations while minimizing observer bias. Its goal is for research to be conducted in a fair, unbiased, and repeatable manner. So these are key things that in any experiment, in any research you want to do. It's minimize, and this is key, you want to minimize bias. Why would want somebody or whoever's doing the research to minimize bias? What's so wrong about bias?
It's your own opinions.
Okay, good. Anything else?
It's not fact.
Okay. So let's say, for example, I'm grading your project, right? And I'm biased. I'm biased in favoring people that starts with the letter A. All right, I'm just trying to find something neutral. Okay? So I'm biased in favor of people that name starts with the letter A. And your name does not start with the letter A. And then I purposely gave you a lower grade because your name didn't start with the letter A. Is that fair?
No.
Is that objective?
No.
So we all have our biases. It's a given fact. Science scientific method, ultimately its goal is to try to create an objective environment that whatever experiment you want to conduct, bias is minimized. Understanding that sometimes, if not all the time, bias would not be totally eliminated, but it's so minimized that your results are going to be what we call valid. Valid is meaning that you measured what you wanted to measure. So you ask a question, as this chart shows, you ask a question, you do background research, then you construct a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is just an educated guess based on what you have known, what you have known about the topic. You do an educated guess, which is essentially your claim. I'm trying to think of. So I can hypothesize that. Any fans of Taylor Swift? Taylor Swift fans, anybody? Some of them. So I can hypothesize that Taylor Swift will remain as the top grossing singer in the next 5 years. Okay. So we'll do an experiment, but it's going to take 5 years to do it. And then we'll collect data, and then get some, charts, record sales or download sales data, and then compare them with other people, and to see if that claim is true or not. And then if it's not true, then my claim was wrong. If it's true, great, my claim is wrong. Essentially, I went through the process of either supporting or at least determining if my claim is true or not. So you construct a hypothesis, you do an experiment, you analyze the results, and then you, like I said, you determine if the hypothesis is true or the hypothesis is false or partially true, and then you report the results. So these are key things of academic research or scientific research. Number one is replicable. So who knows how to cook in this class? Okay. Those of you that raise your hand, what's your favorite dish to cook? We'll start with you. Sandwich? Hey, I'll take that. All right. Anybody else? I'm sorry? Spaghetti? All right. What other dish? I'm sorry. I'm probably not. Spaghetti too? Did you take your answer?
Yeah.
How about sandwich? Anybody else knows how to cook? No? They don't want to admit it?
Okay.
Eggs? Okay. I'll be fine. Hold on. Go ahead.
Chicken parmesan.
Chicken. Oh, wow. All right.
Actually very easy.
All right, so in 2 days we're going to have a potluck.
Shepherd's pie. I haven't heard that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing. All right, so we're going to have a sign-up list. I'm just kidding.
What's your favorite on the block?
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's cool.
Like the most complicated thing.
Even if it's a sandwich, it's too, that's fine. That's cool. I could boil an egg. How about that? I know how to do.
You'll be surprised how many people in Subway don't know how to make a sandwich.
Well, you have to make a good sandwich. And I'm sure you probably make a very good sandwich. So good. I agree. How about barbecue? Does anybody barbecue? So, where do you live? I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. Party at her. I'm just kidding. Let's see. Okay. What did happen? And I didn't get involved. So the key thing is, like, do you ever follow a recipe?
When you have to bake, yes you do, but when you're cooking, you really don't have to.
You were gonna say something?
Okay.
No, no. Okay, so sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, right?
In cooking, I just throw like whatever I want. It's to taste.
But you learned that through experience, right?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
maybe initially you followed a recipe, right?
Yes, a guideline.
I got it. So it's the same thing about research. In research, there's like a recipe. And like for example, when you go to KFC or McDonald's, and you try to do the same thing what they did, it doesn't turn out the same thing, right? Because you don't know what they did. You know what special ingredients they used and how they cook it, where they got the meat. So in research, we actually try to tell everybody, when we do any experiments, we tell people how we conducted the research to the point of like a recipe. And it has to be done in a certain way that, let's say, you said chicken parmesan, right? Let's say you wrote down exactly how you did it. And then I gave that recipe to somebody else here. And I go, okay, try to reproduce what, that chicken parmesan you made in your kitchen and see if it's the same taste. And if it comes out to be the same, then that means that we're able to replicate that. If it's different, we have to figure out what happened. Why was it different? Maybe because of the chicken, maybe it came from Trader Joe's instead of Whole Foods. Right? Or maybe it's because we used a different type of salt. We used Himalayan salt versus regular just sea salt. I'm just saying that if the taste is different, we have to understand why. Ultimately, the research has to be able to be reproduced. You can replicate the research. So that's key number one. Another thing is it has to be falsifiable. Falsifiable means that you can prove it wrong. So if I have, kind of like going back to my Taylor Swift example, that she's going to be the top grossing artist in the next 5 years, that's falsifiable. I can be proved wrong. One thing that doesn't follow this is like, do ghosts exist? Can you falsify the claim that do ghosts exist? What do you think? Can you say that they don't? Maybe they're hiding. But the key thing is, the point I want to make is that whatever you're trying to make a claim to or about, that you can be proved wrong. So that's a key characteristic about scientific research. Another key area is precision. Remember in our previous lecture we talked about key areas, how to measure. I think we talked about how we measure anger, how we measure love and affection. And the key thing that we talked about was how to define it. So precision is really about defining those key terms enough that you measure them well, that you were able to adequately measure those areas. And then the last one is parsimony. Has anybody heard of Occam's razor? Occam's razor is basically means that if you have competing explanations about something, the most simplest, the most straightforward explanation is the one that should be selected. So those are key characteristics about scientific research. So just remember, kind of like the recipe example, you're able to reproduce it. Somebody else is able to reproduce or replicate your whatever chicken parmesan, or in this case, your experiment. You can be proved wrong. You have to be really precise with your definitions of what you're trying to measure. And then parsimony, that whatever explanations you do decide to explain your findings, that you select the most simplest explanation. So there's a hierarchy of claims or statements or truths. So a hypothesis is just an educated guess. Okay, that's the beginning point of anything. So based on your knowledge, based on your experience, you make a claim based on that knowledge that you have, and then you say, this is going to happen. Let's say I'm student A, I'm going to get an A because I know I have I've done a lot of research, I know how I am, I'm gonna get a name. A theory is like, it's a widely accepted explanation of natural phenomena, it has stood up through a continual testing. So, let's say, using a general student as an example, not only am I, but you see, I'm gonna get an A because I've been getting A's for the past 5 years. Then you should ask, why am I in school for the past 5 years? That's a long time. And I go, well, I like to retake my courses. No. But anyway, that's a joke. But a theory is like, well, through multiple testing, multiple experiments, I have found this to be true. And then a law is essentially that it's hard to violate. Like, it's like gravity. Like if you drop an apple, it's going to hit the ground. That happens all the time. There's never an exception. Theory, at least, is open for an exception. Theory says, well, theory is like if you drop an apple, it may fall, or may not. No. Law is essentially saying it's going to fall, no matter what you do. So there's various research approaches that you can do to experiment. There's two big categories of research approaches. There's the quantitative side, and there's the qualitative side. So when a good way to remember these is quantity or quantitative is like counting. Think about counting, measuring things. For qualitative, think about quality. It's not necessarily you're measuring something or you're counting something. It's more about evaluating the quality of something. Categorizing. In this course, we're going to focus mostly in quantitative. Quantitative, by essence, is counting using statistics to measure things. There's other courses that focus us in qualitative that is sometimes more suited for other different types of projects. Has anybody heard these terms before?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. When is a good time, well, when's a good and appropriate time to use a qualitative research approach? Like what's the topic, what's a research focus or question that you would use a more qualitative approach?
When I go shopping for, let's say, a phone, I do my research and which one has better quality. I guess you could say that would suit my needs.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I have one.
I think, so when you say like quality, could be like features, things like that?
I have one.
Go ahead.
When I was bringing the kids to school, I was checking out different schools and everything that they offer and if it was feasible to,
Okay, so you're checking some schools out
for the kids,
for
yeah.
the kids. Okay. Now, did you check the environment?
Yeah, of course.
Did you check the neighborhood, like the neighboring houses, community? Did you go inside the class?
Yes, I also looked at test scores and all that stuff, the school system.
Okay. How about the teachers? Did you meet any of the teachers or see them or?
We didn't really meet specific teachers, but we did meet with like the administrative staff.
Okay. So you didn't really like measure anything, but you kind of got a good sense of it.
We put our pros and cons.
Okay. So that's kind of, I mean, you can, it can go either way, honestly, but it can be qualitative. I think that's qualitative.
Because we were asking personal questions, like not personal questions, but like questions that I'm like, well, okay, well, we have this situation, how
Yeah.
can we work that out and stuff, so we're getting more quality answers rather than saying, oh, the weather's nicer on this side of the area.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing. Good. Another example could be, let's say, when you first decided to come to Casa de LA, were there other schools that you were thinking about? so did you visit other schools?
Yes.
And so, similar to kind of like what you went through, so when you visited other schools, like what were you looking for? What were you, like what was your focus?
How much does it cost?
Okay, cost is one. What else?
Is it close by?
Close by. What else?
Times, like, class where we live.
Okay. If there is a class available during the time frame that you're available, right? Okay, good. Anything else?
Make sure they have the major you want to go into.
Okay. That is available that for you to major in. Anything else? Environment? How about statistics professors? Not fun. Or professors, it could be quality of school or quality professors. So, you didn't really determine it's one thing or another, right? There was not one single factor that determined it. It was like a whole, it's like a group of factors, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Like, it's not just the cost. It's the courses, as I mentioned, the major, the courses, the distance. So you put it all in like, kind of like put them all, you listened all down, you kind of made like a determination based on all these number of factors. So that's pretty much like I would say it's more like a mixed approach. Because each factor was weighted differently, right? Some people may weigh cost more. Some people may weigh distance a lot more. But you did it in a qualitative fashion that in the sense that I think it could fall under qualitative because he didn't like did anybody make calculations? Okay, cost, I put that as a 5. Distance, I put that as a 3. This school. So he gave like an index for this school, and then this other school gave it like a 5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Did anybody do anything like that? It was just mostly just trying to gather general information about the whole class.
That I did for the kids like it because some different districts, they have the schools listed 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, blah blah blah. So I used those I looked at.
Okay.
Those numbers.
So when we talk about qualitative, it's more about description. Does anybody shop at Amazon?
Yes.
What's Amazon?
Love it.
You look at the reviews, right? The feedback, the type of reviews. And so you read one, let's say you're buying, what's popular? What's a cool thing to buy right? Headphones, right? Textbooks, yes. You're in the market for buying a textbook. So you read the reviews, and then you say, oh, I love this book. This is by far the best book I've ever bought. And this is by me. I was the one who did it. And then I'm not a verified purchaser. But you take that into consideration, right? If I'm a verified purchaser, if I'm not, what do you think? And I write great things about the book. What's your take?
How do you know it's a good book?
Yeah, because I didn't buy it, right? So, are you going to weigh my opinion highly or very low? But then other people put their feedback. They said, oh, I love this book too. Verified purchase. Now, how much are you going to weigh that?
Higher.
So, and then you create like a word cloud or something like that. You know, based on all the descriptions, you say, okay, pretty much this book gets really great reviews. People said that it's very useful. People said that it's easy to follow. It explains things very, very smoothly, very clearly. So that's quality. Anything that requires more like a description of something, a phenomenon or an item, that's more quality. And if you categorize it into different things, it could be like, oh, this is more like mathematical. I can also purchase other things that are more child development related. You can categorize like, create categories like that. So if you categories like that, that's still also qualitative. The moment you start measuring and using numbers, then it becomes quantitative. Now the stars on Amazon, it goes from 1 to 5, right? Or 0 to 5? Now, most of you purchase things that are 3 and above? Has anybody purchased anything that is 2 stars or below? Why not?
It's for money, and having a return is
Yes. How about something that has 2 stars and 1,000 people reviewing it? No. Okay, 4.5 stars, 2,000 people reviewing it. That's a good thing, right? So you see, you use quantitative measurements to make those decisions. So that's more quantitative. Sometimes you have to use both to get answers. Because, I mean, we can, like in this class, I could bring up quizzes, I could bring up test scores, but does it tell you the full picture? Does it tell you the full story of how you experience this class? What is missing? Like if I just give you test scores, I mean, I just provide you, let's say for a particular class, that you only have test scores, quizzes, and just numbers. What's missing from that, from that class? How would you know?
our comments or testimony.
Yes. So that gives you a more complete picture, right? If you listen to comments, or not listen, but if you read the comments. So that's more like qualitative. So sometimes it's actually better if you use both, quantitative and qualitative, to make a decision that whatever you're trying to decide to do. So there's various methods of either qualitative and quantitative. So when we talk about quantitative, the main methods of acquiring data and information typically comes in the form of surveys. It could be online, it could be mail. Sometimes if you get those telephone calls that they want to take a poll, they want to get your opinion. It typically comes from that way, that way, to gather that information. They could also do experiments, simulations, and qualitative data typically is acquired through focus group. Has anybody participated in a focus group? So does anybody know what a focus group is? Who wants to share?
It's when they gather maybe 5 to 8 people or maybe 10. They put them in a room and they show them something and they amongst themselves kind of decide what they thought about it.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Essentially, that's you said. So gather a group of people, get people's opinions, and then document. It could be interviews. Has anybody been interviewed for a research project? Go ahead. How was that experience?
It was good. I was interviewed parallel to some other person next to me. They were asked the same questions, but it was about an hour session.
Wow, it's pretty long.
Yes, about maybe 15 questions.
Okay. So that's and they either audio record your answers or they wrote them down, right?
Both.
They did both. It could be human observation. Sometimes you can look at, let's say if you're checking out schools, look how the kids are interacting, observe them, write a description about them. Or case studies. Has anybody done a case study about any topic? Yeah? You want to, right? Yeah, sure. It's on you. You keep it going. Keep moving. Just kidding, I'm kidding. So these are the key ways to conduct research using those two key or two main ways of research approaches. So we have the quantitative data side, and we have the qualitative data side. So those are the key areas or key ways to acquire that data and information. And so we also have, I just want to bring this up to you. So survey and questionnaire, there's multiple ways to gather information. The quantitative, you can have a survey that just have mostly open-ended questions. So just because you're doing a survey, it doesn't automatically mean it's going to be quantitative. Sometimes what happens, there's a lot of open-ended questions, you have to type or write them down, and then it becomes, it's actually used for a qualitative approach to get more descriptions about whatever you're, or whatever they're trying to measure. But then it becomes more quantitative when it's closed-ended questions or Likert scale questions, when they ask you, how do you like Casa de Ley? You know, I love it. Love it. Like it. This, you circle this, circle that descriptor. Or they ask you about questions about parking. I'm sure a lot of people love parking here. That was a funny joke. Thank goodness. All right. Or it could be multiple choice questions. So anything like that that requires like closed-ended question, Likert scale, multiple choice questions, when it doesn't allow you to put like a description or allow you, well, it doesn't give you flexibility on how to respond to it, it has a more quantitative approach as compared to the open-ended approach. And then we'll talk about research design. So who here takes a multivitamin? All right. Does it make a difference? Do you feel when you take that multivitamin, it gives you more energy? Then why do you take it?
Because my mom told me to.
Okay,
Because my mom told me to.
all right. That's good enough for me. All right, follow your mom's advice. Anybody? Okay, anybody else? Who takes a multivitamin? Do you take a multivitamin? Does it give you more energy?
Yes, Ernie does.
How do you know?
Because I keep it every and I write when I'm feeling that way, and I notice when I take vitamins, after a little bit, it evens out. It moves better.
Okay.
The energy levels higher.
Okay.
Especially when it's even.
Have you ever taken it, have you not taken it and documented your experience? And did it make a difference? Okay, all right. Anybody else take some multivitamin? No? I'll be selling some multivitamins at the end of class. I have my own line. It's called Dr. Almost multivitamin. It's on Amazon. Two stars so far. It's going to be a huge seller. What's it do? Okay. Sometimes it's hard to tell if something's having an impact. Who drinks like those energy drinks? Anybody? Like Rockstar?
Coffee.
You drink-
Yesterday I didn't take it, and at my 2 o'clock class I was on that.
Oh, okay, okay.
It was sad.
Okay, good to know. Did you take it today?
I
Did you
did.
drink it?
I'm pretty aware.
Okay.
Alert today. Yeah.
Very good. So, my point is this, is that it's not always easy to determine the cause of things. And to determine if something caused something, you need to run an experiment. I'll give you an example. I forgot specifically what was the purpose of the experiment, but what happens is that they were giving one group of people what we call a placebo. Does anybody know what a placebo means? So a placebo is, just for those who don't know, it's something that will not have any effect. But they tell them, take this pill. Take this pill, you're going to feel a lot better. And then, and I think they gave another group, which was like the actual drug, like I think for them to feel better as well. And then they compared it. And after they did the analysis, they found out that those that were taking the placebo, which was not an effective drug, it was just like a sugar pill or something like that, they were feeling a lot better, like the other ones that were taking the drug. So it's what we call the placebo effect. And what the result of that experiment was that it's not necessarily the pill that caused that, or that made them feel better. It was more like the thought, the mentality, that they were feeling better. So it only happens that the only way to find out is when you do an experiment. An experiment like that, where you would have two groups, you give one of them placebo, the other one you give them the real medication, and then you compare them at the end. If they're both feeling good, then did it really have an effect? I mean, is the drug really effective? What do you think? No, because they're probably going to feel like that anyway, even without the drug. So you need to run an experiment to find out really the cause of something that is making them feel good or bad. So there's a continuum, what we call a continuum of experiments. So the most rigorous type of experiment is called experimental, true experimental. So the most rigorous, most compelling, least biased. So it uses random selection. Now, why is it good to do a random selection? What do you think?
To eliminate bias or as much as possible?
So remember what I was telling you about before? Bias is everywhere. So if I start picking and choosing people to be part of my experiment, and I go, okay, you, okay, you be part of this group, and you. So just by doing that in itself, there's a bias already, because I happen to be just looking this way, and I just chose you to be part of that group, and then this side part of this group. The way you've been coming in, or the way your location. So your seating location, has it been similar to the first day of class? I noticed that. That's something that I noticed too in other courses, that when people, except for the new individuals, this is your first time. But I noticed when they come in, when students come in, it's pretty much they don't really sway much or move much from their initial seat. So anyway, there's a bias in just your seating location too, and a bias from your end as well. And so through random selection, I eliminate that, because anybody has a fair chance. I have no control of who's going to be which group. So that's the importance of random selection. Now, a control group. Does anybody know what a control group is?
Group that we don't do anything to.
Okay.
Just kind of leave it there.
Is that true? Does anybody disagree with that?
I thought control group was the one that you would like, for example, would give the medication to.
Thank you for sharing, but technically, I would say no. It's called the treatment group. So
Oh, I see.
the treatment group gets the treatment, the control group does not. Now, what's so important about the control group? Exactly. Thank you for sharing. So yes, so control group, a lot of statistics or experiments, it's all about comparing. The only way to know if there was any differences of any group is to compare with something else. A lot of experiments. Essentially, you need to compare it with something in order to understand the differences. So the control group essentially serves that purpose. The purpose of comparing it, whatever like you're trying to experiment, you're comparing it with the control group. So it helps you establish cause and effect, considered to be the most rigorous type of research design. Typically, they use this for medications or anything health related. But sometimes you don't have the luxury of doing an experimental design research project. So sometimes, because of cost, because of access, because of your conditions, you only have a certain amount of flexibility to do your experiment. So we have another one called quasi-experimental. It does not include randomization of participants. It may include the comparison group. Individuals in the control or comparison group may have similar qualities, characteristics at the individuals of the intervention group. So just remember, it's like a spectrum. So the best is true experimental. The middle one is quasi-experimental. And then the last one is like on the lower end, it's called non-experimental. It's the least vigorous, least compelling, lowest level of internal validity, does not include randomization of participants, may not include a control group. It's just more feasible and sometimes more cost effective. Now, if I were to show you 3 studies, and let's say the 2 experimental said that this medication A is really effective, and then the non-experimental one that says it's not effective, which one would you weigh more? Which one would you strongly consider more in terms of your decision if it's effective or not? Yes. Does anybody agree with that? You think pure experimental is better than non-experimental? Anybody else? No votes. Okay. So the point is this. When you see a study that was done with a true experimental design, you can see, at least you can be confident that the bias has been minimized. It's more rigorous. Therefore, whatever the results that they have, it's going to be more compelling as compared to other types. All right, so these are just key terms it's good to recognize that we have cause and effect. Essentially, we're trying to, a lot of our research questions will be trying to focus on cause and effect. Just curious, is anybody familiar with birth order theory? All right, so who's the firstborn here? Okay, who's the last one? All right, so are y'all more rebellious? You are? Okay, so for those who are lastborns, are you very different from your siblings?
Very.
All right. The firstborn, are you pretty in line with the expectations from your parent or partner? All right. See, I should be one of those psychics. So there's a saying in birth order theory that in the lastborns, they tend to be the most rebellious. This is theory now, just theory. Because they want to get the attention of the parents. So they tend to be very different. How about middle child? Any middle child here? All right, so let me guess. Tend to be very pleasing. You like to have peace. You like to compromise. That was setting it up like everybody.
Okay, fine.
I'm sorry?
You're the child who forget. You're the others there.
Does that describe you?
Yeah.
No?
For me, it's like the one that they always made. Like even though well, I'm married and I don't live at home. So for me, it's like my brothers, even though they're there, like they're always calling me. Like I need this, I need to have this. Like I was always like there's back support for everything.
That's funny. I serve
Without
that.
the cons one.
That's probably why.
I'm sorry?
I said that's probably why they chose you for answers.
And I'm the only daughter, so they're brothers, so I'm guessing that way too. I got the most responsibility.
That's funny because I serve that one. I'm the middle child. And I have a similar role. Like I'm the one that they rely on for almost anything. Wow, everybody else is doing all the thing. It's interesting. Okay, well thank you for sharing. So the key thing is that things have a cause and effect. And so in this case, the birth order theory is making the claim that depending on what order you were born in, that has an effect on your personality. Job performance. We got 1 minute. So I'm going to wrap it up soon. So like for example, these are your predictor variables and your outcome variables. So these are the, one way of seeing it, these are the causes, that's the effect. So your job performance is dependent on salary, job satisfaction, years of employment. Who works here? Who has a job? So do you think this is true? The amount you're getting paid, how happy you are, how many years you've been working, determines your job performance? Is that safe to say? Yes and no? Maybe there's other factors. It's not the factors, but there are a factors.
It's part of the other factors, yeah.
Yes. So essentially, that's the way of thinking that we need to do. The cause and effect. Predictor variables, object variables. So on Thursday, we'll go over some questions, some exercises that we'll go over. Other than that, you can adjourn unless you have any questions. All right, see you Thursday.
I came late to your class.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got the time wrong. I thought my other class started at 4:30, and this so it was my bad. It won't happen again.
Mario, right?
Yes, Mario Reyes. Very sorry about that.
Oh, you too. I like your headphones.
Thank you. Wait, no, I haven't.
I haven't seen you on
Yeah.
No, I'll try my best to keep you informed. Eventually.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing right now. Thank you.
Sure.
I got this book, but I saw on the.
Yeah, it's a different book, actually.
Yeah, because I know on Get you have this one up, or the school has it up.
I do.